My name is Arline. I'm 37 years old. And this is the story of how the man I loved betrayed me, and how I didn't just survive it. I flipped the script before he ever saw it coming. It was an ordinary Wednesday afternoon in Austin, Texas. Sunlight streamed through the blinds of my home office, painting golden lines across the financial reports I was reviewing. From the outside, anyone looking in would have said I had it all: a beautiful home in the suburbs, a successful career as an internal accounting specialist at a Fortune 500 firm, and a husband people admired. Brandon. 40, powerful, charismatic. A top-tier attorney who never walked into a room without commanding attention. But behind that picture-perfect frame was a truth I hadn't dared say out loud. Not even to myself. I was about to get my answer. My phone buzzed beside me. A message from an Instagram account I didn't recognize, CamillaJ_23. I didn't open it immediately. Something about it made my fingers freeze mid-motion. Instead, I looked up at the wedding photo on my shelf. Brandon's smile. His arm around me like I was his whole world. 14 years. That's how long I had stood by him. 14 years of making sacrifices, biting my tongue when he forgot birthdays, anniversaries, and milestones because he was chasing a case. I finally tapped the message. My blood turned cold. He's about to leave you and take all the money. Here's what you need to know. Attached were 4 photos. Brandon, my Brandon, shirtless in a hotel suite I recognized. The Grand Oak Ridge. The place he once said he'd take me for our 15th anniversary. But he was there with her. Camilla. A sleek, young woman with expensive taste and the audacity to smirk at the camera like she had won something. Underneath the photos, the final dagger. He doesn't love you anymore. We're starting fresh, with the money he saved. Accept the truth. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even blink. What I felt was cold. Controlled. Like a switch had flipped. Because what Camilla didn't know was that I'd seen the signs. The perfume that clung to his suits. The late-night meetings. The sudden secrecy. 3 months ago, I opened a private account and began quietly siphoning small amounts from our joint funds. Just enough each week to go unnoticed. I told myself it was precaution. But in truth, it was instinct. I had spent years in finance. I knew what to do with numbers. I knew how to hide in them. Now I stared at that balance, over $130,000, safely under my name. Money Brandon thought he'd steal from me, now out of reach. That night, I lay beside him in bed as he snored lightly, unaware. I stared at the ceiling. I thought about all the times I helped him edit presentations, coached him on pitches, stayed up with him reviewing files, playing the part of the loyal wife while slowly erasing myself. But now? Now I was wide awake. And I was done playing small. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared into the dark, listening to the faint hum of the city outside our window, Brandon's steady breathing beside me like the beat of a lie I'd lived too long. My mind raced, not with panic, but with precision. I knew who I was. I wasn't some scorned wife waiting for her world to fall apart. I was the woman who'd built her career dissecting fraud, chasing down financial shadows no one else could see. Brandon thought he could cheat on me, steal from me, and vanish without a trace. He had no idea who he was dealing with. By the time dawn broke, I had already created a new spreadsheet on my laptop. I called it Home Budget, so boring and familiar he'd never think to open it. But inside, it was a map of his lies. Every restaurant receipt from a place I'd never been. Every boutique charge. Every luxury hotel stay during his supposed conferences. Brandon had gotten sloppy. He'd started withdrawing cash in amounts just under the reportable threshold, thinking he was being clever. But numbers don't lie, and neither did the pattern he left behind. That Saturday, Brandon said he was heading to San Antonio for a weekend case prep retreat with his firm. I nodded sweetly, even helped him pack. I even slipped a folded shirt into his bag that still held traces of my perfume. Then, once he was gone, I opened his home office drawer. The one he thought I never touched. That's where I found it, the burner phone. And on that phone were text messages that read like a script from a soap opera. Just a few more days, baby. The money's almost all set. She suspects nothing. There were pictures too. Of Camilla in lingerie. Of Brandon smiling like a high schooler on prom night. And then, one message from Camilla that made me pause. Make sure she signs everything before you leave. If she contests, the prenup won't hold. I stared at that line for a long time. My hands didn't shake. But my heart, it hurt. Not from the betrayal. But from realizing how calculated it all was. Brandon wasn't just cheating on me. He was planning a clean getaway. But the problem with trying to rob someone like me is, you don't know how fast we can do math in our heads. By Monday morning, I had already shifted more money into my private account, converted a portion into secure assets, and changed the beneficiary on my life insurance policy. I also contacted my friend Marla, a real estate broker, and asked her to run a discreet analysis of Brandon's recent property inquiries. Turns out, he'd been looking at villas in Costa Rica. Cash offers. Under a fake LLC. I should have felt devastated. But what I felt was rage wrapped in ice. Because this man, this coward, wasn't just trying to break my heart. He was trying to erase me. But he forgot something critical. I was never just his wife. I was the architect of everything he had. I sat beside him when he filled out loan documents, stood beside him when he didn't believe he could make partner, and corrected his resumes when he first applied to top firms. Without me, there was no Brandon Carter. So if he wanted to start over? He'd have to do it without my money, without his reputation, and without the fake narrative he crafted for the world. That night, I started phase 2. I created encrypted folders containing all his shady transactions. I built timelines, cross-referenced with his firm's case files, and started matching dates to expense claims. There was a clear trail of unethical behavior, using firm resources for personal gain. I called a private investigator named Jerome, someone I had worked with once in a forensic audit. I didn't need him to follow Brandon. I had already done most of the work. I just needed backup. A credible witness. Jerome didn't ask too many questions. When I showed him the spreadsheet, he raised an eyebrow. "You're about to burn this man to the ground," he said. I looked him straight in the eye. "No. I'm just turning on the lights so everyone can see what he really is." The next week felt like walking a tightrope, except I wasn't the one about to fall. Brandon still acted like the man I married. Still kissed me on the cheek before leaving 4 meetings, still asked me if I needed anything from the store, still came home reeking of guilt and a perfume I hadn't worn since my 20s. But now I saw him for who he really was. A liar dressed in law degrees. A coward in cufflinks. One night, while he showered, I checked the safe behind the painting in his office. The combination hadn't changed. That was mistake number 14, give or take. Inside, I found more than just our marriage certificate and old tax records. There was a manila folder labeled exit plan. I sat on the floor, silent, steady, flipping through papers while water thundered in the next room. Fake identities. A notarized power of attorney form. Blank signature lines with sticky notes that read, "Have her sign quietly." Legal phrasing ironclad. I didn't flinch. I didn't even feel the sting anymore. All I felt was strategy. I carefully scanned each document into my laptop and placed the originals exactly as I found them. Later that night, I stared at the folder on my desktop, proof of premeditation. I backed it up to 2 external hard drives, one hidden in my car's spare tire compartment, the other mailed to my cousin in Seattle. Brandon was building an escape route. But what he didn't know was that I was building a courtroom. That Friday, he took me out for dinner. Said he wanted to reconnect, maybe plan a getaway for the summer. The audacity. We went to Fiore, a romantic Italian place we used to love. Candlelit tables. Soft jazz. That used to mean something. He poured me wine and smiled across the table like nothing had changed. You've been quiet lately. Work stressful? I met his eyes. Nothing I can't handle. In truth, I was calm because I had already arranged everything for the audit I had triggered anonymously against his firm. The paperwork would arrive next week. He'd think it was a random regulatory check. Until they opened the books. I excused myself and stepped away to the bathroom. There, I took out my phone and sent a text to Jerome. It's time. Begin the surveillance drop. He replied within seconds. Already done. Camilla's been seen meeting with a banker on 9th and Monroe. Footage incoming. Perfect. I walked back to the table just in time to hear Brandon on the phone, speaking in a low, urgent tone. Of course, baby. She doesn't suspect a thing. He froze when he saw me. I slid back into my seat, tilting my head like I hadn't heard a word. Everything okay? He cleared his throat. Just work. That night, I let him fall asleep first. Then I went into the guest room, opened my laptop, and uploaded the surveillance photos to my secured folder, Camilla, entering a private bank Brandon used to have power of attorney access to. His entire scheme was unraveling, thread by thread, and he didn't even know it. What Camilla didn't realize was that the moment she sent me those taunting photos, she made herself part of the evidence. She became a co-conspirator in Brandon's financial betrayal. And now? I was about to give her center stage. The next few days passed like slow-moving thunder. Every second buzzed with anticipation, every moment was calculated. I wasn't just watching Brandon now, I was watching the world around him begin to shift. On Wednesday, I received a call from Jerome. She's back at the bank, he said, low and calm. Same account number as before. There was a wire transfer yesterday, 15 grand. Want the footage? Yes, I said without hesitation. Send it to both drives. The video showed Camilla standing at a sleek, private banking desk. Her tone was demanding, the kind of voice a woman uses when she thinks the world owes her something. I recognized the account name Brandon had once accidentally mentioned in his sleep, C2H Group Holdings, a shell company he thought was clever. He had funneled over $80,000 into it. I had proof of every transfer. At work, I moved through my tasks flawlessly, never missing a number. But beneath the surface, I was orchestrating Brandon's fall like a conductor guiding a symphony. Every note of betrayal would land in harmony. Thursday night, Brandon returned home unusually late, his shirt untucked, the scent of Camilla's perfume clinging to his skin like an insult. He dropped his briefcase on the kitchen table, mumbled something about last-minute client work, and headed for the shower. I waited. When he was done, I handed him a glass of wine and sat across from him in the living room. I got a strange call from our bank today, I said softly, watching his reaction. He tensed, ever so slightly. Oh. About what? They said someone requested access to our joint financials, someone who wasn't listed as an account holder. His eyes darted away. Probably a mistake. I'll look into it. I smiled gently. Don't worry. I already did. He stared at me. Silent. And for a split second, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time, fear. The next day, I called the private server I had hired to work at the dinner Brandon had arranged with his firm's top clients. This was the night he thought he'd impress everyone, win over Howard Green, the venture capitalist that could catapult him to national prominence, and quietly celebrate the completion of his great escape plan. But that dinner would be his undoing. I confirmed every detail. The room. The seating. The wine. The server who would subtly deliver the flash drive into Howard Green's hand halfway through the meal. No explanation, no announcement, just a silent transfer. On the drive home that night, I glanced at Brandon's reflection in the window. He looked content. Confident. He had no idea that the noose was already around his neck. That evening, I made my final preparations. On my laptop, I uploaded the entire file, every document, photo, message, and transaction, to 3 major destinations. The Board of Partners at Foster and Lane. The Texas State Bar Association's Ethics Committee. And the Financial Crimes Division of the State Attorney's Office. I hovered over the send button for only a moment. Then I clicked. And just like that, Brandon's carefully constructed world began to burn. The night of the dinner arrived like a calm before a hurricane. Brandon stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his silk tie with practiced elegance. He looked at me through the reflection and smiled, the same smile he used to give juries right before destroying his opponent's credibility. "You look incredible tonight, babe," he said smoothly. "Let's make a good impression, yeah?" I smiled back, calm and composed. "Absolutely. A night to remember." And it would be. Just not in the way he imagined. We arrived at Aurora Heights Club, one of Austin's most exclusive private venues. Candlelight glowed from crystal chandeliers, and classical music played softly beneath the low hum of polished conversations. Brandon moved among the guests like a prince, handshakes, half-hugs, that easy charisma he wore like cologne. I stayed at his side, playing the perfect wife. The gracious hostess. I greeted every partner, poured wine, and fielded compliments on the decor. But my mind was locked on the clock. At precisely 8:43 p.m., as dessert was being served, rich chocolate mousse, red berries, hand-selected by Brandon himself, I saw the server approach Howard Green's table. He bent low, said something brief, and slid a small envelope into Howard's palm. Howard's expression didn't change. But I saw the way his thumb ran over the flash drive hidden inside. I knew he'd read it. And I knew he'd understand exactly what he held. Across the table, Brandon raised his glass. To partnerships, progress, and prosperity. Howard nodded but didn't toast. Then it happened. The doors to the banquet room flung open, slamming against the walls like thunder. A woman burst in, disheveled, makeup smeared, red dress clinging to her like a last hope. Camilla. She looked wild. Furious. Betrayed. "Brandon Carter," she shrieked. "You liar. You said you wired the rest yesterday." Gasps rippled through the room. Brandon froze, color draining from his face. "Camilla, this is not the time." "Oh, I know it's the time," she snapped, yanking a necklace from her bag and throwing it on the table. "You bought this with a client's money, remember? You said you just had to play nice tonight, and then we were gone." You could hear a pin drop. All eyes turned to Brandon, then to me. I didn't say a word. Just took a sip of water. Howard Green stood slowly, calm but commanding. "Mr. Carter, we'll be in touch. I think it's best we withdraw from this evening's agreement until further notice." He looked at me and nodded, a subtle but unmistakable gesture of respect. Then the buzz began. Phones vibrated. Emails opened. The flash drive had done its job. Brandon fumbled in his jacket, pulling out his wallet. He waved down the server. "Let me just settle this." The server returned seconds later. "Sir, I'm sorry. That card was declined." Brandon's hands shook as he pulled out another. Then another. All declined. I don't understand," he muttered. I stood slowly, fixing my dress, and placed a folded note next to his glass. "You moved the money." I moved faster. He looked up at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Arline, what did you do?" I smiled. I let you have your night, Brandon. Now it's mine. Brandon didn't speak on the way home. His silence was louder than anything he could have said. He sat in the passenger seat like a man being driven to his own execution, jaw tight, hands trembling slightly in his lap. I didn't rush. I drove slow, steady, through the glowing lights of downtown Austin, the hum of the engine matching the rhythm of the reckoning he never saw coming. When we pulled into the driveway, he turned to me, voice low. You set me up. No, I replied softly. I held up a mirror. You set the trap. I just made sure everyone saw what you were doing in it. He stormed inside like a cornered animal, muttering curses under his breath. He slammed the bedroom door behind him, not knowing I had already removed the safe's documents, the burner phone, the cash he thought was hidden in our emergency lockbox. He had nothing left to reach for. Nothing to run to. The next morning, before Brandon could make any moves, the doorbell rang. 2 men in dark suits stood on our porch, state investigators, badges out, serious expressions. Mr. Brandon Carter? Brandon hesitated. Yes. We're here to execute a warrant for financial records and electronic devices in relation to an embezzlement investigation. His face drained of all color. You must be mistaken. They handed him the papers. We're not. I stood behind them, arms folded, silent. He turned to me, lips parted in disbelief. You called them. No, Brandon, I said quietly. I just gave them what they needed. You called them, with every wire transfer, every lie, every betrayal. They took his laptop, the hard drive from his office, even his phone. One investigator paused before leaving. Ma'am, thank you for your cooperation. Your files were detailed. Very helpful. When they left, Brandon stood in the middle of our living room, stunned. You're destroying me, he whispered. No, I said calmly. You did that all by yourself. I'm just making sure you don't bury anyone else in the wreckage. 3 days later, I received a call from Foster and Lane. Arline, Richard Foster said, his voice heavy. Brandon's been suspended. The board voted unanimously. Thank you for coming forward. He paused before adding, we're forwarding the case to the State Bar and the Attorney General's office. His license won't survive this. He'll be lucky if he doesn't face jail time. That evening, I sat in my home office, the very space where it had all started, and began removing every photo, every memory. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was clean. Clear. And free. Camilla? She vanished. Her social media went dark. No more flashy beach selfies, no more Mrs. Carter 2B captions. I imagine once the money dried up and the headlines broke, she decided to disappear. Brandon tried to contact me a few times. Emails. One long letter begging me to reconsider, claiming he was lost, that he didn't know how it had gone this far. I didn't respond. Instead, I met with my lawyer. Finalized the divorce. Moved everything into my name, the house, the accounts, even the Lexus he once bragged about buying me with pride. I changed my name too. Arline Monroe. Because I would never wear the name of a man who tried to erase me again. The divorce was finalized on a quiet autumn morning. No courtroom drama. No fight left in him. Brandon signed the papers with a shaking hand. I signed with one steady stroke. It was done. I walked out of the courthouse alone, but not empty. I didn't leave broken. I left rebuilt. In the weeks that followed, the silence in the house no longer felt hollow. It felt earned. Peaceful. I redecorated the walls. Tore down the wedding photos. Replaced them with my certifications, achievements, and a new vision board. Because I had plans. Big ones. I used a portion of the money I secured to rent an office in a historic building downtown. The name on the door? Monroe Financial Forensics. Fraud Analysis. Value Protection. Recovery with Integrity. My first client came through Margaret Green, Howard's wife. She'd heard what happened and said, "We need someone like you. Someone who sees things before they go wrong." Then came more. Small law firms. Mid-sized tech companies. Women-owned startups who didn't trust their investors. Word got around, if you wanted the truth, discreetly, efficiently, and with receipts, you called Arline Monroe. I didn't just start a business. I started a movement. I gathered other women like me, women who once stood in the shadows of powerful men. Wives, assistants, quiet backbone types. We formed a circle of trust, where secrets became strategy, and silence became strength. And every time I helped someone protect their company, trace a fraudulent vendor, or stop a dishonest partner before the damage was done, I felt it again. That deep, solid truth. I didn't just save myself. I became someone who could save others. One afternoon, a bouquet arrived at my office. White lilies and lavender. A card tucked inside, written in sharp, masculine script. "Arline, you didn't just walk through fire. You made it burn clean. With respect. Richard Foster." I smiled, placing it on my desk. That was the thing no one expected. That after the betrayal, the shame, the destruction, I would still rise. Not bitter. Not broken. But better. Brandon became a cautionary tale in the legal world. His name turned up in ethics seminars and law school lectures. A bright star fallen to greed. He tried, I heard, to move to a different state, restart his life. But his past followed him like a shadow he couldn't outrun. Me? I moved forward. I made new friends. Traveled. Hosted dinner parties with my team, women who once questioned their own worth but now ran audits like generals. And every now and then, I'd receive a message. A quiet thank you. From someone who heard my story, someone who watched it on a channel like this one. Because it wasn't just my story. It was a reminder to every woman trapped in silence, you are not powerless. You are not small. You don't have to scream to be heard. Just move smart. Prepare quietly. Strike once. And when they ask, how did she do it? Smile. Because they'll never see it coming. What did you think of Arline's journey? Would you have done what she did, or something even colder? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, make sure to follow Revenge Echoes for more shocking tales of betrayal, strength, and payback.